Hello there, I am Richie Stormtrooper. Welcome to my channel. In this video we're looking at a question that still seems to crop up every now and again on the forums, so I thought why not take a look at it here. The question, do I need to paint my armour? Before we do get started, if you find this video useful or interesting, please do like and subscribe to see more videos, and if you want notifications, please click the bell icon. In another video we already covered the idea of painting these little bits of detail in grey and blue and in black. That's not what we're looking at today. We're looking at the question of whether we need to actually paint the plastic, the substrate that we are going to be using, the kit that we're going to be assembling before we assemble it. The short answer is it depends. So let's find out on what it depends. Essentially what we're going to be doing in this video is looking at different types of plastic, because the short answer is it depends on what type of plastic you're using, whether you need to paint your armour. Now, there was a time when everybody seemed to be painting their new armour builds, and that was probably due to the discovery of Simon of RS Props, his original Stormtrooper costume. When he brought it down from the attic after all those years, it seemed there was some white paint on there. It had been painted white. Initially people thought that this was paint that was from the prop department and that this was confirmation that all the suits were indeed painted. But it turned out, I think Simon eventually mentioned it, that he, whilst he had had the Stormtrooper costume in his possession when he was little, he had painted over it. So it wasn't originally from the props department, it was something that he'd added later. So we're pretty certain that the original Stormtrooper armour did not feature any paint, that it was plain plastic. So why then would you possibly need to use paint? I will of course come to that later, and I will also be offering you my opinion on the types of plastic that need to be painted and what types of plastic I prefer to use. But first let's have a look at what types of plastic are available. Let's start with ABS then, the plastic type ABS. This is probably the most common type of plastic that is currently being worn and sold within the Stormtrooper community. It is indeed the plastic that was used to make the original Stormtrooper armour. It's the only plastic that I have. I have two full Stormtrooper costumes, and they both feature ABS armour. For me it was a simple question. This is the type of plastic that was used on the originals, so I wanted to replicate the originals as best as I could, so that was the way to go. As I have already mentioned, the plastic armour, the body armour on the original suits was not painted. So if you're going to go with ABS, you definitely do not need to paint your armour. The helmet is a different question. The helmets in the original movie were indeed painted. I will probably do a more in-depth video, certainly do more in-depth information on this when I come to assembling the helmet and painting, etc. This is actually an ABS helmet. And I have chosen to paint it because the original helmets were painted. The reason behind that was that they were made out of a green plastic. I believe it was PP, polypropylene plastic. It was what Andrew Ainsworth seemingly had lying around in the workshop, and rather than ordering some new material, he went and used the green and then went on to paint it. It was a quirky choice for many reasons. We'll cover that in another video. But it meant the helmets, of course, had to be painted, and they were all painted with a gloss spray paint, it seems. I also have an ABS helmet which is not painted. My Empire Strikes Back helmet, for instance, is just plain ABS. I chose not to paint it. It makes for a uniform look. It matches the armour, and it's already white. So if we go back to 1976, we don't have the problem of having some green plastic, but there's no real need to do so. That's completely up to you. My two armour makers of choice do of course offer ABS armour. They also tend to offer a second option. Let's look at Trooper Master first. This is Trooper Master armour, and this is plain gloss ABS. He also offers a more idealised option, which is acrylic capped ABS. This is something he also shares in common with SDS, Shepperton Design Studios, Andrew Ainsworth. They, for whatever reason, I guess it's just for a more idealised look, he uses the same base plastic, ABS plastic, with a thin cap of acrylic over the top. What this means is that the plastic itself is thicker. It tends to be 2mm. This is 1.5mm. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it makes quite a difference. If we consider that this is 1.5mm, this is of course not even formed. Where this is formed and stretched over a mold, it does become thinner in parts. You can probably appreciate here, this is a little thinner and more flexible. That extra 0.5mm does affect flexibility a little bit, and it feels a little heavier. It's not a great difference, but it can be a little bit noisier. One of my earlier suits was indeed a 2mm acrylic capped plastic armour. It was a little clunky, but it makes for very nice, idealised, very bright, shiny look. We associate Stormtroopers with shiny white plastic, largely because it's seen under studio lights. The plain ABS on this suit is indeed very gloss. It's very shiny, and as soon as you get that in front of flash photography, for instance, it really replicates the look, on-screen look, as you would imagine. But if you want to go one step further, want something a little more idealized that even looks in dull conditions very shiny, the ABS capped stuff is a decent option. RS Prop Masters also offer an alternative type of plastic, which is also a more idealized look. It is PVC. It's in the same kind of grade. It's the same thickness as the ABS. I think it's 1.5mm. But it has a very, very, very pure white finish and a very shiny finish. It's a very pronounced gloss. It's again, for the same reason as the ABS cap stuff, it's good for going for an idealized look. It kind of gives you, if you're at an event and meeting the public, it probably is more in line with what they remember in their heads as that Stormtrooper look, that pure white, glossy look under the studio lights. The ABS is a little off-white. It isn't quite a pure white. That may surprise a few people if you're just used to looking at the Stormtroopers on screen and associating them with gloss, high gloss white, but it's the accurate option. The PVC also has slightly different qualities that can be a benefit or a disadvantage. If we're talking about flexural strength, ABS really is, as you can see here, will withstand a lot of bending. It has, I think that's flexural strength, to use a technical term. It really is quite a good flexible armour, and it will take quite a lot of wearing and abuse to form any cracks in this armour. They do occur. I have experienced some cracking where there's lots of stress here around the cod or on the butt plate. They can be repaired. I'll probably cover repairs in another video, but all in all, it's a good flexible option. PVC goes even further. I would suggest that if I subject this ABS to repeated stress in one area, at some point I'm going to form a crease. Now the PVC is incredible in that it is so flexible. I think you would be there for years and years and years repeating this stress test before you would get any damage, see any damage. The downside of the armour is I have seen parts shatter. I believe it is more brittle. It's less resistant to impact, so I could toss this ABS part around. I won't do it right now, but I could throw this to the floor and it's going to resist any impacts quite well. Slightly less flexible than PVC, but a lot more resistant to impacts. It is not brittle in any way. It's very flexible and does not shatter. Now I have heard from several sources that PVC parts, if dropped from even a medium height, so maybe the height of a shelf or a table, the parts can shatter, so they are more brittle. If you're careful with it and don't toss it on the floor, you will get the most flexible armour, and you will certainly not see any damage, I don't think, from repeated bending from walking movements, which does happen on the ABS. So that's also one thing to consider whilst you're choosing your plastic. Now, returning to the actual point of the video as to whether we need to paint the armour, of course, like the ABS, and the acrylic capped ABS, the PVC does not need to be painted. It is very much a idealized painted look. It looks very high gloss, as if it had been painted. So absolutely no need to paint the armour, and most people leave their helmet also matching because it is a very brilliant white. They leave it unpainted, so you have a uniform look. We've looked then at all the plastics available from my chosen makers, RS Prop Masters and Trooper Master, and none of them need to be painted. And we have also addressed the idea of what's screen accurate. Plain gloss ABS, unpainted, is the accurate choice. So why on earth would you ever need to paint your Stormtrooper armour? Well, there is a fourth type of plastic which is still reasonably common. I say reasonably common, it used to be more common. Within the 501st Legion, I think it's less and less common. People who take this hobby seriously and are going to be using these kits to be worn more and more are certainly steering away from it, and that would be HIP's high impact polystyrene. It's a cheaper grade of plastic, and it is not at all glossy. It was used on kits, for instance TE2. I don't know if he's still making kits, I believe not. I think he sold the molds on to ATA, and as far as I know ATA is using full ABS. But just be aware that if you do end up with a suit of armour which is made of HIP's high impact polystyrene, it's really going to need to be painted. It's going to need to be primed and then sprayed with gloss paint. Or if you're considering buying some armour and the high impact polystyrene seems like a cheaper option, it's probably a false economy, because in the end you're going to have to paint it. And just to give you my 2 cents on the matter, I would say stay away from anything which is made of HIP's high impact polystyrene. It is an inferior grade of plastic. No matter how thick it is, it doesn't have the good qualities, the good properties that ABS has. It's very, very susceptible to damage with even minor bending like this. I would be able to go through the plastic, whether it be 2 millimeters in thickness, 1 millimeter, 1.5, very quickly. And experience has shown troopers wearing costumes made of high impact polystyrene are constantly doing running repairs. Maybe address that in another video, how you can do running repairs and how you can reinforce the armour. But my general advice would be, if you've not already bought your armour, stay away from anything that is high impact polystyrene. Sellers on eBay offering things which seem too good to be true. They may look great and come at a really great price, but it's an unknown brand. It's not recommended on the forum. If you want a full list of recommended sellers, do visit the first Imperial Stormtrooper detachment at whitearmour.net, and that way you will avoid any possible pitfalls. Just to conclude the subject of the video then, all our types of plastic that I would recommend: plain gloss ABS, ABS with an acrylic cap, or PVC. They do not need to be painted. There is no point painting them. They are very recommendable for use for trooping. They will stand up to wear and tear. The only type of plastic which would require a high gloss paint finish would be HIP's, and for the reasons we've also already mentioned, not just the pain of painting it, it is not recommendable for trooping. I hope this video was informative and useful for you. If so, please do like and subscribe. Click on the bell icon if you want to get reminders when I post something new, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.